All right. Hey there, everybody. So I think we're all set here. We had some internet troubles getting started here, so hopefully that's not too much of an issue. The connection might be a little spotty, so we'll see. But anyway, regardless of that, my name's Travis. I'm an instructor here at Watts, and I've been here for a little while, since 2018. And I've got this Dean Cornwell masterstudy that I've been working on for a little bit. And so, yeah, we'll just kind of go through and I'll do some painting on this and kind of talk a little bit about some of my, the technique process build up for kind of how I, got it to this stage. And then we'll get into painting one of the characters on this. And yeah, so not too much more to say with that, other than looking forward to kind of digging into it and seeing if we can do some good painting tonight. So yeah, maybe we can take a look at this whole thing. And if you guys have any questions or anything like that, that's that's totally cool. So just ask away. And yeah, so to talk a little bit about this, it was just a painting that I can't remember where I first saw it actually, but I came across an image of it. It might have been in the Dean Cornwell book, the Illustrated Press. And so I don't know, when I just saw it, I thought it was super cool. And yeah, kind of wanted to, I sat on it for a while and I thought about, maybe doing a big study of it. I thought about maybe doing a smaller one at first, but I don't know. My main impetus for it really was that I saw it and I thought, man, that would be really cool to hang in my living room if I could. So I just liked the painting a lot, so I thought maybe I could do a master study. Everything good?
Yeah, just okay. It looks like we're getting some feedback, but
Oh, okay.
I just listened to the audio stream.
Okay. All right. So, but yeah. So my my thought was that I could maybe hang it in my living room once it's done, and it would look cool inside a frame. And I like the painting, so. But yeah, it was a really interesting piece. I thought a lot of different patterning, and it's very colorful. There's a lot of grays, as many colorful paintings a lot of times have a lot of grays in them, just because those gray kind of more muted tones will help give the context of the color. And so there's a lot, a lot of the figures have kind of pasty or ruddy skin. The kind of stucco wall in the back is very muted. There's a lot of, I'll talk about my palette as well and the colors that I have on there and what color palette I decided to go with for this painting. But the colors I've been dipping into the most have been burnt umber and cobalt blue for the most part, and using those to mix together a lot of the darks that we're seeing. So yeah, let me grab, I've got some papers up front there that I'll just kind of pull out and show real quick to show you how I got the painting to this process. And we'll be able to take questions and stuff later on too, when we kind of get into things a little bit, but let me just grab those real quick. So yeah, this surface that I'm painting on is it's just a board, just a masonite board, I think 3/8 of an inch. Just a hardboard that I bought from the department store. And I had done some estimations as far as how big I wanted to make this painting. And it's definitely not as big as he painted it. He probably painted it, I'm not sure what the actual original size is, but I think it's maybe, I don't know, 30 to 40% bigger than what I'm painting here. But basically what I had done, and I'll try not to get this all over the actual painting because it's still wet, is I printed out, so I got an image of it, and I sized up the image in Photoshop to generally the size that I wanted to paint it at. And this is, I think I measured it earlier, it's like 23 high by 38 wide. So getting close to 4 feet. And so I had printed out, printed out the painting just on sheets, and I had to stitch them all together with this tape. And then this I used as my transfer sheet, basically. So this, it lays over perfectly, and it gave me all the guidelines for things. And you could see on this, I have, I'm not really copying exactly. I'm trying to design his shapes and his, design out his drawing a little bit, because you can't really copy exactly a painting like this. So once I had gotten that all worked out, I made some transfer paper, which is just basically some tracing paper with a bunch of graphite on the back. And I learned this technique from Jeff's dad, where you can put a bunch of graphite on the back of a tracing paper and then take some lighter fluid and smear it on a paper towel, and then that kind of seals the graphite into the paper. I'm not necessarily sure that I would recommend anybody to do that, but it's a method that seems to work for me. You can also just buy rolls of transfer paper. But one thing I like about that method is that I can put the graphite on very, very dense, and then I can seal it in, and it's a very rich piece of paper. So when I flip this over and I draw over that drawing, it transfers that into the board. So that's what all this underdrawing that you're seeing is from that transfer paper. And so I go through a stage where I transfer that, and then I afterwards would clean up the drawing a little bit. So I'd just take a regular graphite pencil, either a mechanical pencil or maybe a 6B, and then just go through and kind of clean up the drawing a little bit more, develop the values a little bit more, kind of go for a two-tone, light and dark. If an area was really big, I might just scratch in some of the lines rather than trying to fill it in really meticulously. So to get to the stage where I had it all worked out with just the line work and the board and everything, it was about maybe 10 to 12 hours, somewhere in that range, to printing all the paper and, stitching them all together, and then making the transfer paper sheets, and then, doing all that. So quite a bit of an intensive process, but I like doing the transfer paper a bit more than projecting, which is maybe a little more standardly how we tend to do things at Watts. But for me, I like the transfer paper. I think it works pretty good. And then from there, as you can see, most of this is all stained in. So I went ahead and I sealed the drawing with some workable fixative, just like a spray can that you spray over the top of your drawing just to seal it and make sure that the drawing's not going to rub away. And that's something that you definitely want to do outside, because it's harmful vapors inside the can. And then I actually, after I put the workable fixative down, I took some clear gesso and I did a layer of clear gesso over the workable fixative. And the reason I did that was I just really wanted to make sure that I didn't lose the drawing, because I spent so much time on this drawing, getting it all worked in, that I really wanted to make sure that I didn't lose it, because sometimes spray fixative can be a little bit unreliable, I would say. or maybe if you accidentally miss some spot, then when you go to do your stains and lay in with your Gamsol, your drawing will dissolve. So I was pretty careful about doing the drawing, doing the spray fixative, and then putting a layer of gesso over it to seal it. And that seems to have worked pretty well. And so, yeah, I went ahead and I stained in. You guys, I think, can see the reference, or at least a little piece of it. You know, when I get into actually painting, you'll be able to see that. But if you go just look up on the internet, Dean Cornwell, Spanish Tavern, I believe is the name of this painting, then you'll be able to, you should be able to see what it actually looks like. And yeah, so I just basically stained everything in with the relative colors that were there. So at the school at Watts, you'll hear us talk about that being called localized stains, just staining with the local color, basically. Some areas are a bit, you know, challenging just because they're more dry brushy textured stuff. And this is really the first layer of this painting. Realistically, you know, some areas are more finished and done, but some areas like the drapery down in here, these draped sections through here, you'll be able to see some smoky texture and things like that coming through here. That's all going to have to be done with dry brushing later on. And, you know, which is going to mean I'm going to have to paint the whole first layer and then let that dry completely, or, you know, maybe 80%, and then do strokes on top of that, which would then create that dry brush type effect. One important thing about trying to tackle a big master study, or really any master study, depending on your goals, is having an understanding of texture and surfaces. For this particular study, I tried to leave quite a bit of or some texture on the board with the gesso that I had put on it. I kind of forgot to mention that as a stage, but I got this board and then I put gesso, 3 or 4 layers of thick gesso down on it, just with a brush, and let that dry so it's all nice and you know, ready for the drawing. Gessoed masonite boards is something that we typically paint on, but Cornwell probably didn't paint on that. I'm not exactly sure what he painted on. Most likely, my guess would be he may have painted on a board that was primed with lead, a lead ground, or he may have done it on a canvas that was primed with lead as well. So I'm actually not really sure, but what I was going to say was an important part of doing master studies, and especially trying to get it close and kind of authentic to the person you're studying, is having an understanding of the surface that they worked on. The surface is going to be the thing that really dictates the look of the painting. So for example, if I had taken this board and sanded it down super, super smooth, then I actually wouldn't be able to get a lot of this texture and, you know, kind of, it's a very textural painting. So I wouldn't be able to get that as well, especially with dry brush strokes and things like that, if it was a super smooth board. So if you're going to try to study somebody who's a looser, more textural painter, then having a good understanding of the type of surface that they painted on is probably a good idea. Like if I had a really textured board, I probably couldn't really paint a Bouguereau that well, because Bouguereau is a very fine renderer, so, or an Alma Tadema, or any of those certain sergeants as well would be probably challenging. You know, some more rendered styles or different painterly styles require different types of surfaces. So you can still accomplish a lot just with an acrylic gesso, which is what I used. But, you know, to have some sense of the painting, the texture of the board will very much dictate how the painting ends up looking. So one mistake that I feel like I made with this is that I actually probably made it a little too smooth in some areas. So anyway, that being said, I kind of wanted to just provide a little context about this painting, some general understanding of process advice about tackling something like this. This is kind of a ridiculous master study to do, but I don't care. I'm going to do it anyway. And just because I really like the painting. And so we can go ahead and maybe get close in on this area here, and then I'll kind of get started laying in some color and everything. So
while the camera is getting adjusted, we had a question. Did you sand the gesso?
Yeah, I did, lightly. I tried to look at the board and or the painting and see where the most textural spots were, and then sand specifically in areas where I thought there would be less texture. For example, there's more rendering in this back, so we probably want it a little smoother there. But that's the thing I was kind of just mentioning, is that I probably over sanded in some areas, like the background. It would have been much wiser to leave this a bit more textural so that I can really get some of that. So anyway, yeah, so let's go ahead and, are we good on this? Okay. So, yeah, we can kind of get into maybe starting to lay in some of the paint on this guy. And we do have the workshop going in the background, so you probably will hear people chatting and stuff like that. And do we have the palette cam? Is that going? Okay. And just to talk a little bit about my color palette that I chose for this painting. I basically am using the warm cool primary palette that we use at Watts. And so that basically consists of titanium white, ivory black, cad red light, and I actually have a couple of extra colors. So we usually, the warm cool primary is usually a warm cool red, a warm cool yellow, and a warm cool blue. And I'll talk a little bit about the supplemental colors that I have, but titanium white, ivory black, cadmium red light. I have cadmium red deep. I have alizarin. I have cadmium yellow, Hansa yellow light, which is basically just a cool yellow. So cad lemon would work, or perhaps even cad yellow light could work as well. I have kind of a weird color called azure blue, but it's just a very light blue, kind of like a baby blue or a sky blue kind of color. Cobalt blue, phthalo blue, which is a bit of a dicey color just because of how strong it is. But I included that because he obviously has areas where he's used phthalo blue and phthalo green. I have sap green, viridian, phthalo green, burnt umber, and then yellow ochre. And then down on the bottom, I actually have a couple of other supplemental colors, magenta, dioxazine violet, or dioxazine purple, and just a flesh tone. So I have embedded within this the warm cool primary palette, but I decided to include a few supplemental colors like the cad red deep, the phthalo blue, the phthalo green, and actually a warm cool green. So sap green is a warm green, viridian is a cool green, and then phthalo is kind of cool as well. And then burnt umber and yellow ochre are basically just some earth tones. Having some earth tones in there is helpful. And I included magenta and purple in the flesh tone just because they're convenient. So realistically, this is an uncontrolled palette, but I have my primary thinking at first was to do the warm cool primary. Okay, so let me grab a brush here. Probably will be flipping between a few brushes, a few smaller ones. So we're going to start with this head here. So I'm just going to kind of grab a array of a few brushes. All right. So I basically, for my brushes, I'm just using some small sables. And my palette is really dirty as well, so I probably should clean off just a little bit of that. I actually would really recommend to try to not clean your palette all the time when you're doing something like this, mostly because you end up using you end up using a lot of these colors to mix into. So, you know, it's just really helpful to have some of the color piles just already established. But just something like that will probably be good. Sometimes if you're doing like a different section, then it can be good to clean off your palette, but I try to be careful about that. I know some people are very particular about cleaning off the palette, but I think from my view, it really looks like Cornwell is a pretty, I would say, guttural of a painter. And he's really intermixing a lot of stuff, and a lot of stuff gets sort of ruddy and grayed down and everything. Obviously, he's a total master, so he can do whatever he wants and can really control the paint no matter what. So let's maybe go with this one to start. Maybe, I think I had another brush. Here it is. So the brushes are nothing special, just a mix of all the main brands. Okay. So I'm going to start with just laying in some of the darks. And I'll go ahead and grab some alizarin and some burnt umber, a little bit of black. And I'll stain in with just some Gamsol here. So I'll try to make sure that I don't have too much Gamsol in it. Also, I have a little ruler somewhere. Where did I put that? Oh, there it is. Okay. So I just use a ruler to kind of rest my hand on as a maul stick. So this stage really is just staining in what we see. And I have this kind of ruddy mixture. You can see I've already stained in some of the more powerful colors that I see in his face there. I think generally you're not really supposed to scrub with sable brushes too much, but I am just kind of using whatever the brushes will give me. It doesn't really matter 100%. You just don't want to ruin your nice brushes if you buy a brand new one and do a bunch of scrubbing on the surface with it and then completely tears up tears everything up. And I see this color under the hat as being a bit more this ruddy red color. I see little hints of green in the hair in here. Could probably mix that with some yellow ochre, burnt umber, a little bit of white. These kind of studies are very good for just intuitive color mixing, trying to get a good sense of how to work through color a little bit more intuitively, which has been a big discovery for me over the years. I remember first getting here and trying to paint and trying to do a colored portrait, and I just completely failed so bad, and I was so frustrated with myself. And that was after I had been at the school for probably 6 months maybe. And it takes a while. You just have to be introduced to the concepts, one by one, little piece at a time. And then slowly over time, you really start to develop a good sense of how to use these concepts and bend these concepts. But color is a tough one because in the beginning you might be failing a lot with that and not really understanding why. But it really comes down to in my opinion. Understanding warm and cool relationships. And the relationship is between the colors is the most important thing. Most people can, I don't want to say anybody, but most people can match colors pretty good. Like if they see a color, they can mix it and match and get it, close. And then if you can get it close, it's just about understanding the relationships and what kind of mixing you need to do to do that well. So I'm just going to basically, this stage is just me reinforcing the drawing. I'm going through, I already have it drawn all in and designed, and we've got Cornwell's design. But with this stage, it's kind of important to, I'm going through and just trying to carefully reinforce the drawing to begin with. And go ahead and mix up a little bit more. Because I really, especially with a looser painting style like this, I feel like trying to keep hold of that drawing is pretty important. Any other questions or anything so far, Tate?
We had someone in the chat ask if you're using a weighted palette. Yeah.
What that means. So I'm not sure if they could clarify or something like that. That'd be great. But yeah, I'm not sure. Okay, try to establish anything else or? Okay. So, yeah, just trying to lock in on these eyes here in the eye socket. Okay. Now we do have some reflected light and things going on, and I might get into that in just a moment. So I'm kind of, I'm staining in, but I'm also sort of using a technique that we call scumbling, which is where you're just sort of moving the brush around and pushing the paint around, pushing it into the surface a little bit. And so as we kind of start working outside of these stains a little bit, so this hair is this is kind of how you have to start thinking ahead a bit on some of these exercises. And the hair is a bit darker, right? It's much cooler. I might take a little bit of Gamsol for that. Typically, I don't actually use a lot of Gamsol when I'm painting. But just to finish my my thought there, you might look at this hair and think that you want to immediately start painting it that color, but actually, what I'm going to do is still try to maybe just sketch in a warmer undertone so that I can have a warm, kind of a warmer color underneath, and then I can start to layer those cools down on top of it. Okay, there, and then, yeah, got another question.
We had a question that asked, after this staining, do you go in with a thicker layer of the same color?
Not necessarily. Sometimes yes, but sometimes no. It depends on, kind of how I'm thinking through the process. Just like I was talking about here, if I'm going to stain this hair is much cooler and it's a little bit more on the green side. At least it's got little touches of that in it. And I might start by staining it in with just some, kind of like a sketched in thing like that. And then afterwards, I'm going to go and layer across cooler tones on top of that. So what I get when I do that is I get a warm base. It's kind of like a more rich, warm, deeper shadow with cools layered on top of it. And that creates a bit of a color, you could say like a color vibration. or an interplay between the warms and cools, which can look kind of nice. It would still look fine if we just went and painted it straight, the same colors. But in this context, because I think that's what Cornwell would do, is that he would probably go in and just paint a bit more of a warmer undertone and then start to layer the cools on top of that. I'm going to be kind of leaning in and changing around a little bit just because these big lights that we have, I think it looks okay for you guys, but to me, it's all there's a lot of like reflections happening. So I might lean around a bit to try to just get around that slightly. So I see that up in this area, we have some more reds in the flesh tones. So I'll basically just take some of that cad red light and mix it in there. And again, we have a darker, ruddier, so it's a bit hard for me to talk when I'm mixing. Add a little bit of white into that. Some of these little smaller changes in color and value, you're probably not going to be able to pick up on the camera super well right away. But as we kind of get a little bit further on, I think the changes will start to show. Yeah, mixing colors and talking it for me at the same time is really difficult, basically impossible. Okay, so let's grab Cad Deep, mix that in. That seems a little too red, too dark, so.
We have another question from the audience. How long do you wait for the stain layer to dry?
So all of the stains right now are dry. All this is dry. This semi-stain that I put in here is, it's not dry yet. Obviously, it's still wet. But that's okay if I'm painting more wet into wet. I went across and I stained the whole thing at first. And, that I did all in one shot. It took about 4 hours to stain the whole thing. And I wanted to let that dry completely before I started doing the layers on top of it. So, stains, they're going to dry at different levels, and it's kind of just about what effect you want to pull out of the paint. That's going to do that. I'll maybe dip into the magenta a little bit of white. So you get a slightly cooler red. I know that Cornwell, let's see, mustache, lip, and okay, so about right there. So if I try to find the bottom lip. I know that Cornwell, from what I remember seeing in one of James Gurney's videos a while back, he would often, it seemed like, do a burnt umber underpainting for his paintings. And, that's going to also lead to a much richer, kind of darker area. So those dark areas I want to try to keep a little bit thinner. And then definitely for this later on, we want to try to thicken up some of the lighter areas. But let's see here. So that's a little bit too warm. I need to try to dump some white into that, dump some yellow ochre. A little bit of blue. too on the yellow side, so we'll take a little bit of red. Let's wipe some of the extra paint off my brush. Okay, that's getting close. Sometimes it takes a little bit to get some of the colors that you're after. I can also follow some principles that I've learned here, like, you know, forehead generally being a little more yellow, cheeks being a little bit more red, nose being a little more red as well, and you know, the chin being a little bit more blue, gray. The thing is, you know, I understand and I know those principles, but I'm not really seeing those play out too aggressively here. So there's really not much sense in me too aggressively applying that unless I wanted to. But it just seems to me to be a little bit more effective, I think, right now to kind of go in for more the colors that I'm seeing in that particular scenario. You know, and I'm going to try my best with this, but I hope at the end of the night I don't have to scrub it. It could happen, because I might not get the right balance and the right, you know, look that I'm looking for. But if I can try to keep the values working, the value is the most important thing. Just trying to get this shape of the brown here. So I'm really going through, and you know, this is still under the value that it is. You have some stronger tiles up in this section as well. So I'm also, you know, thinking about the tiling approach. That's something that when we teach gouache here, we talk about tiling, which is basically shape recognition painting. And those of you who do the figure drawing classes here will have a really good understanding of what we mean by shape recognition. But, you know, we're basically looking for breaking down and identifying various facets and planes of the head into various shapes, which we can then kind of identify and fill in, essentially. And so it really helps with, I found that trying to work on a painting like this, what's I think helped me a lot is having a pretty good understanding of a lot of those different techniques that we teach. So soft scumbling, direct painting, tiling, staining, burn umber pickouts. You know, there's a reason that we teach all those things, and it's because when you go into a big painting like this, then you kind of end up using a lot of those things together. You know, if you're knowledgeable about those techniques and how they work, and you're not locked into just painting in one technique, then you can kind of use whatever little tool you want. And so, okay, now over here. All right, so we're starting to set this up. We've started to get the head. We've got some warmer tones than what we actually have here. The way I'm looking at this and breaking it down is I'm setting up that warmer underlayer, that warmer base, and I'm going to work from warmth in the shadows up to my cools. I can see when I break down and look at his cheek, these areas right here and right here, that and of course on the nose and on the forehead, those are all planes. If we think about the Asaro head, those are all planes that are facing the light source at more of a direct angle. So the light source is cool, it's coming down, it's hitting all those planes, and it's making them cool, and the planes start to warm as they turn away. So if we can start to build our tiles in such a way that we're hitting the cools on the planes that are brightest, and then we're slowly turning towards our warmer tiles and into our warm shadows, you know, then that's a good place to be. And that's, I would say that feels like a good way to sort of analyze this, this painting. Now, one thing that I'm sort of guessing is going to be kind of a challenge for me here is going to be working out the more delicate shapes of this eye, specifically that white of the eye. And that's just going to take a lot of focus, and we'll see if I can pull it off. But so we've got the eye socket. Start to lay in to the cheek. Let's take a warmer color. Any other questions so far?
Yeah, we got a few.
Okay. We have a question. Who are your favorite artists? Guessing Dean Cornwell is one of them.
Yeah, for sure. I love Cornwell stuff. You know, it's a lot of the main people. Like if you're talking about old masters, or older masters, it's a lot of the people that we talk about, you know, in the school nowadays. So Dean Cornwell, J.C. Leyendecker, Alphonse Mucha, Bouguereau, you know, all those guys are awesome. I think of those kind of older illustrators and fine artists, my favorite is probably Dean Cornwell, with Leyendecker as a close second. I kind of flip-flop back and forth between them sometimes because Leyendecker was just so good. But I think Dean Cornwell, one of the reasons I wanted to tackle this painting is I just felt that Dean Cornwell's painting style really resonates with me for some reason. And so, you know, something about that more, it's refined, but it's very emotional. I think it's very, I said before, but guttural. I've heard Jeff use that term a lot, and I think it just accurately describes kind of how I feel about Cornwell. I also really like, there's a guy named Walter Everett, and I really liked Walter Everett's stuff. And he's actually, you know, he really staged his stuff like Cornwell a lot of times. A lot of those guys, Mead Schaefer and Cornwell and what was the other guy? Even like looking at the inkers like Montgomery Flagg and stuff, a lot of them staged their work very similarly. But Walter Everett, he did that too, but he was an amazingly cool, you could say, pattern painter. I think a lot of his compositions were very pattern oriented. And he almost kind of painted the opposite of Cornwell, where if you look close at his stuff, it's all super clean planes and everything's very, like, it's not rough and palette knife, and I don't think, at least, I haven't seen that when I've looked at some of his work, but Walter Everett's great. But you know, other artists that I really like nowadays, you know, of course, like the big ones like Craig Mullins and stuff like that are awesome. But you know, I really like TB Choi's stuff. There's another guy, I hope I pronounced his name right, Ongyen Sporin. He's really great. He's done a bunch of, like, I think D&D illustrations over the past couple of years, which are really cool. And his stuff's just really stylized and really fun. Huge fan of Evan Amundsen, Ruan Jia. I really like, there's another artist, Thomas Chamberlain Keane. I think he is just absolutely fantastic. So I really want to work towards that more stylized kind of stuff. You know, art for characters, for books, board games, video games. You know, I love video games, so a lot of those guys inspire me. So just plugging in little tiles. I'm going to take some of this alizarin, mix it with some burnt umber.
So another question from the chat is, have you ever tried any any water-based oil paints?
I haven't, but one of my friends from the school, Ivan, Ivan is awesome. Just a shout out to Ivan. I run a lot of the stuff in the back end of the school, like, just helping run things here, and Ivan just helps out greatly. So definitely shout out to Ivan, and shout out to Tate as well, who's behind the camera. Tate is awesome and really, really helps. And also my brother. But yeah, so the reason I mentioned Ivan is because he's been using water mixable oils, and he apparently really likes them, and apparently they feel very authentic to real oil paint. So, I think, I'm not sure what the consensus is generally on water-based oils, but, maybe try regular oil paint. If you can't do regular oil paint, give water-based oils a try, and I think they're probably pretty good, pretty decent. Someday I'll try them, probably. The main thing with oil paint that's rough is just the mineral spirits, and some of the toxins that you deal with in that. Okay, laying in a little bit of the mustache. Now we do have a little bit of a slightly cooler note there, so maybe I can just touch down a couple of little cools there. Okay, so one thing I was going to talk about earlier, actually, before we continue, let's just... So there's a lot of interesting tiling work and stuff going on in the shadows, but I'm basically just going to go ahead and just block in some of the the general color of those areas. And we've got back here, it's more of the fabric. And that's going to be some white, not phthalo, blue, yellow ochre. And it seems a little bright, but let's try it. Yep, it's a little too bright. So take a little bit of burnt umber, darken it, a little bit of this even. A little bit more blue. A little bit more yellow. It's kind of interesting. It's always kind of a battle between too warm, too cool, too warm, too cool, and then eventually you kind of end up in the right spot. But I usually end up mixing like a bunch of different stuff together. And sometimes I overmix, and so then I've got to grab a bunch of one color and kind of power it in to sort of overpower it. I think that's probably pretty close. A little bit hard to tell, but maybe we'll just kind of throw those down to begin with. I'm probably going to work through this head, at least parts of it. Work down into the scarf a little bit. The scarf is very textural, so I'm definitely not going to get those big, bold brush strokes that he's got in this session. Maybe I'll work down a little bit into the shoulder here. I can't imagine that I would make my way down to the hand, so. Okay, so I'm actually going to grab that similar color that I had. A little bit more white. Okay, now that's getting probably a little bit closer to the value and the color that we want, especially the coolness. Question?
Yeah, I was actually just hoping, could you speak to the amount of time and planning that goes into undertaking a master study of this level?
Yeah, decent amount of planning for sure. Obviously, the first is just the impetus and the interest to begin with. So you want to pick something that's really quite inspiring for you, something that you really be proud to have hanging on your wall at the end of the day. That's kind of the first thing. But yeah, as I've sort of talked about in the beginning, you know, there's a lot of consideration about what size am I going to paint it on, how am I, going to get it all printed out properly. And actually, even I printed it at the size that I thought I was going to paint it on, and then it ended up being too short, about by ½ an inch. So I had ½ an inch of this board extra on the bottom, so I had to cut it. I had to try to cut it perfectly level across the whole, 38-inch wide thing, which was pretty challenging. So even though I've prepped and prepared and did a lot of prep work, I still ended up with little mistakes here and there somehow that slid through. So the drawing, the printing out of the reference, the prepping of the surface, the extra work to draw it in, to then fix up your drawing, to make it even more clear for yourself, to sketch and shade it in, to spray fixing it, to not rushing through any of this, trying to be intentional at every single stage, spray fixing it, to gessoing over my spray fix to ensure that I'm not going to lose the drawing, because I've done paintings before where you don't prep enough and then you end up accidentally losing the drawing when you stain it in. And then it's either you got to freehand it in, which is fine if you're, good enough. But it's kind of not fine when you're setting up a particular method and procedure and then you get a rug pull like that, and then you got to try to deal with, some random thing that you would have never foreseen. Like, I remember one time Eric was coming into the school, and, he had done his whole painting, his whole illustration, like up, all the way through all the stages. It was basically done. He like varnished it, or had varnish on it. And then he had it in some place to dry, and his dog jumped on it and like destroyed the painting, and then he had to go and clean up a bunch of stuff afterwards. So it's like stuff you just never would expect to happen, which is generally how life tends to go anyway. But yeah, so not to get off topic, but yeah, to talk about the prep work, there's a lot, I think, that goes into it, and I wouldn't really ever recommend somebody who's really new to jump into something this big and ambitious. And to be fair, this is over the top. Nobody should really ever need to do something like this unless you want to. Like a big giant master study like this. Maybe they really used to do that back in the day, where somebody would copy like a whole Velasquez or something like that. Also, speaking of old masters, I do like Velasquez a lot. But you probably don't really need to do that. I just am, because I really I like this painting. It's good practice for when you're doing your own oil painted illustrations. So you can work through this process very efficiently and with no real hiccups or issues, then that kind of means that if you had your own your own idea, then you could walk through that whole thing without using a similar type of process. So that's what studies are really good for. But do it on a smaller scale first, I would say. And then slowly work up to something like this over time. Like, to me, this is kind of similar to the figure painting phase that Jeff did, where he copied the Solomon J. Solomon. It's kind of a similar thing. But, I think that one probably would be harder for me because it's just more rendering. And I would say I'd gravitate more towards a painterly or looser kind of style. But, I mean, not always. And I can render, but that would just be challenging for me. So also your inspiration level for the painting will dictate the prep work that goes into it and how easy it is for you to do. And actually, even this painting, I had this thing drawn in, like half of it drawn in, for probably like a year. I did half of it and then it just sat around because I just got busy and I got uninspired. I was like, I don't want to do it. But then, as time went on, I rose to the occasion and, decided to get it finished up. And then doing the Friday Night Live is definitely a motivator to try to, have something really cool to show, something really fun. So I'm going to grab a little bit more of...
A comment from Dylan Mac. Dylan Macco artwork.
Oh,
he says,
Hi,
"Looking
Dylan.
great, Travis. Keep up the awesome work, dude."
Thanks, Dylan. I remember back in the day, Dylan's doing illustration and stuff now, and he's doing awesome. But I remember seeing his work back in the day on the online program before I even started, or I was getting close to it, and he's was always an inspiration.
A big question for you here too. This is not from Dylan. This is from another person online. How do you see the future of realistic painting?
Yeah, that's a pretty big question. Definitely one I would say, I'm not sure I'm really qualified to answer that. But in some ways, I don't think it'll be much different than how it is right now. Just people painting pictures, trying to, whether it's for money or for, soulfulness or, any other reason as gifts, as to make a statement, whatever it is. I think people will probably always do that because I think it's kind of ingrained in people to do that. And, there's things like AI coming in and changing stuff, but, and it probably will change things to some degree. But I think that's no reason to stop what your passion and your interest is. It's just very interesting going into the age that we're going into with all the tech and everything. There's a lot of things that are super cool and a lot of things to be thankful for. And then there's, a lot of challenges with that too. So no matter what, there will always be artists out there with a strong voice doing really cool stuff that are going to be inspiring people. I'm pretty confident in that. And that's really where all this stuff comes from anyway. So, it's just wanting to do it because it's fun. And then, if there's at all any level of interest from people in that way, or just competition or money involved, then people are going to get good at it for sure. So I think it'll always be there, just like it always has.
Got another question here. What are your goals for your art? How have they changed throughout your journey?
Yeah, when I first started kind of learning some of this stuff back in the day, I was really interested in animation. And, I watched when I was a kid a lot of anime, and read a lot of manga and stuff, which was super fun. And so that, I think, kind of got me in the door for art when I was younger. And, I somewhat, definitely grew up in like the internet age too. So when I was like more of a teenager, loved watching like all the internet, animations on like Newgrounds and Ross O'Donovan and Ego Raptor and all that stuff was super inspiring for me. So I was like, I really wanted to try to do that. And but then later on I stumbled upon some videos from the school, and I actually started working at a machine shop for a while, and I worked for a really great guy who really helped me out. And, I kind of thought I was going to be more in that realm for a while, and so I didn't really do much art. That was like in my late teens. But then as time went on, I kind of found out that art was like a career you could do, so I got interested in it again. Stumbled across some of the videos of Jeff on YouTube. I think I stumbled across Stan Prokopenko's YouTube channel first, and then some of the students here were making videos about their experience at Watts, and then I kind of got hooked from there. And so I transitioned into wanting to do more illustration and concept art related stuff. And that's basically what it's been since then, is just wanting to do that stuff. And towards the end of the year, I'm going to have more of a full portfolio of my stuff coming out. Could be more into January, perhaps. And so just to share some of the more like professional illustration concept art stuff that I've done, because I haven't really shared that much of that over the years. I've shared a little bit, but yeah, and then hopefully start doing some more freelance and other things like that next year. And then I've got projects with people that I'm working on and stuff, which is super fun. So I think I'll still always have an interest in like fine art type stuff, just because that's kind of what this is to me. I mean, maybe it was illustration back then for something, but it's really a fine art painting. And so I really like Miles Johnston, I think is his name. He is just really awesome, and he's so creative and cool with the things and he's an amazingly good technical skill as well. So I really, think he's definitely an inspiration for more the fine art side that I would want to go in, which is really funny because one of my friends, for a while I thought I wanted to be like specifically like a fantasy illustrator for like Magic the Gathering and D&D and stuff like that, kind of like Lucas was. And I do like fantasy, but there's some people that just really live and breathe it all the time. And I was kind of like sort of maybe faking to some degree that I wanted to do that, or I thought that was the job to do, so I wanted to try to not pretend is not the right word, but I really thought for a while that that's what I wanted to do, but specifically with fantasy stuff only, I think my interests are a little more broad than that. So while I do definitely still want to do that kind of stuff, I like art. So that's why something like, Miles Johnston stuff really, I think is really cool, is because he just does some really, really interesting subjects and compositions, and again, a good figurative painter, very creative. So that's much more fine art kind of centric, and I think I could definitely see myself doing some of that too later on. But I also love video games a lot. So that's kind of, where I really want to be working in, and the kind of stuff I really want to be doing is more in that realm. And, everything is cool. Like, characters is probably my main interest, but along with environmental stuff, characters, environments, viz dev type stuff, UI is still super cool. Like, if you go look at like Path of Exile 2, they have the UI menus in that game for like the inventory and other things are so cool, done by somebody named Betty Jang. And Betty Jang is awesome, amazing illustrator. And she just did the coolest, like, those are more illustrated type things, but so when you're talking about actual like UI design and stuff, it's a bit different. But yeah, still really cool. So I'm kind of interested in all areas. So it's a very, very long answer to that question, but my interests, they've, I think, more or less remained steady over the years, but as you start to learn more and do more and see more, then you kind of just end up getting experience, getting exposed to more things which might interest you. So I'm just gonna paint for just a second here. Try to go back and reestablish stuff. I've been talking a lot, so it's kind of difficult to talk and paint at the same time.
Chat says UI art is underrated.
Agree.
And if you guys have any questions for Travis, or if I've missed a question that you wanted answered, please don't hesitate to put it in the chat. We will read it out as time allows.
I think these are a bit more orangey flesh tones. Ooh, let's see. So that's too much, I think. So I need to go back with some burnt umber, a little bit of blue, light blue, because blue is the complement of orange. So that's going to get you a bit more of a ruddy, grayed down version. So it's not really the right value.
We have someone in the chat who asks, ever use salt, bleach, or alcohol for effects?
No, never tried that. I've seen like the Richard Schmid book where I think he uses like rubbing alcohol or something like that. I'm actually not sure. Or maybe it's turpentine that he puts in or mineral spirits he puts in, a spray bottle and does cool stuff, but I've never really done that before. Seems cool though. So let's see. I'm gonna try to get this under piece darker. Add in some blue, add back in yellow ochre, add in a little bit of red just to warm it up just a little bit more. That maybe gets us a little closer. On this kind of draped, neck wrap that he's got. Slightly different color. And we can go, so we still have left a lot of this like very warm. A lot of this up here is going to get quite a bit cooler. And you can maybe even take a break from the portrait for a second. Maybe I'll just quickly just get the rest of this. We got a really hard edge here on the lips. Let's just grab some of that. Again, alizarin plus burnt umber makes a really, really nice dark. Kind of, and I'll add in a little bit of black just to darken a little bit more. Alizarin plus burnt umber makes a really nice, rich color for like stains and doing your darks in certain scenarios. Darks are not always going to be, red and ruddy. If you've got a cool light source, then they'll maybe bend that way. but you know, your dark tones can be they can be cool as well. It just depends on your light source. Cool light, warm shadows, warm light, cool shadows, generally. Cool light, warm shadows, cool reflected light. So those are just kind of some guidelines that you can think about. So like I was saying, so I'm going to do something a little weird, which is take just a little bit of this phthalo green, mix it with some burnt umber, and then maybe just place a little bit of it on the edge there. Maybe a little bit of it back there. Sorry, yeah. A little bit hard to see. Okay, one sec. So I'm just sprinkling a little bit of this phthalo green mixture around because, again, I'm going to use that to work into it in just a sec. And I'll probably do the same thing with the hat. So we'll go for phthalo blue, burnt umber, and then maybe just put a little bit of that just on the edge. Because the thing is, once I go in with some white and in the background, which I'll do a little bit of just to try to, you know, work this out slightly, then I'll that white will interact with that color and make kind of a nice halo, interesting sort of effect. So I'll just hit that in a couple of spots, but I don't want to overdo it. Got some nice soft edges and stuff happening right here as well. Let me just... Yeah, so now that I did that, I'm just going to clean off my brush a little bit. You'll notice that I haven't really been cleaning off my brush. I've just been wiping it into this rag. I used to not really wear a glove when I painted as well, but a lot of times the paint ends up seeping through the towel, even if you get a big, like a very absorbent towel. And that can be very, you know, I think not good for you to be absorbing Gamsol and cadmiums. And I've had situations too, Meadow pointed out to me, where I was actually using a paint that had like part of mercury in it. So don't want to be absorbing mercury into your skin. That's really bad. So now I just kind of wear a glove when I paint that holds my rag. Anyway, so we had some more questions, you said?
So we had somebody say, I am going to sign up to the painting program on Watts, which is great news, welcome. I want to begin with gouache. Is there a recommended course to begin with? Is there an intro to gouache on there?
There is. It's called Gouache Phase 1. We don't have like a gouache fundamentals though. So some of the things, actually, one of the things about Gouache Phase 1 is Jeff talks about like doing the drawing and projecting it, but we don't actually have a demo on there that shows the projection method. So you just want to get acquainted or know that those drawings that Jeff's working on in there are actual projections. They're not freehand drawings, because we oftentimes will be projecting our drawings for gouache, very similar to how I've done here, and then working off of that. So just be aware of that when you go into the gouache phase, but still doing, you know, most of your stuff freehand is still really good. Only projecting or doing a tracing for when you actually need it, you know, rather than, you know, abusing that too much. So just be careful on that, I'd say, and have a little bit of knowledge there, but otherwise have fun. Gouache is a really fun medium, and it's a great way to get started with painting.
We have another question here. How would you compare the, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced this, the Barg method to the method at Watts Atelier for drawing?
So there's some pretty big differences. The Barg method is, I'm just going to take a break from painting for a second. I'm just going to talk. I've been painting on this thing like every night for the past like week, so my back is like getting crunched. So the Barg method is generally, from what I understand, it's more site size, which means that you set up the drawing or the reference, and then you set up your drawing, and your goal is to try to make them exactly the same, with them right next to each other. And so that's like a, really, really strong observational drawing is really what that's going to develop, where you're looking at and analyzing shapes and proportions very carefully. And they have all kinds of things that they draw, like they have like some figure lands that they draw with that, but they also have, you draw like casts and drawings of casts in the Bard drawing book. Those are really good for developing your eye in the beginning, I think, and your ability to draw what you see well. And so if somebody's a super beginner and they're really interested in this more like kind of fine art style, maybe sometimes starting with a Bard drawing or two to just really show somebody like, hey, observational drawing. We're drawing what we're seeing and trying to learn how to translate that and get it as accurate as you can is, it's not a bad exercise to do. And I've done a few of them. But where it changes compared to the Watts method is we really, Watts is a little bit interesting because it's a little bit of a hybrid between like an animation style of drawing and a kind of comparative measurement style of drawing. So with a Bard drawing, you kind of have the image next to you, or you're doing a site size cast or something like that. With the way that we draw, we have the model up on the stage and we're all sitting in these benches, or you have your reference out in front of you, and you're making measurements with the pencil, like this, and translating it down to your paper, measuring angles, doing things like that, and then just doing a lot of freehand drawing and trying to get a semblance of accuracy and proportions and structure and all those kinds of things. So the way we draw is like very structural, and the way we teach people to draw is very much, I would say, it feels like a hybrid between a comparative drawing method that you might see in other ateliers with like an animation kind of gestural bend to it. And so basically, though, it's comparative measurement. And we use the Riley method, of course, as well, which is, I won't get too deep into that, but it's kind of just a system for drawing, a system for navigating the human body with a certain collection of abstract lines. I am really a big fan of the method that we use here because I feel like it's very adaptable, it's very malleable, it's very quick. It sort of emphasizes speed as one of its main qualities. Whereas a Bard drawing method or a site size drawing method doesn't really, as far as I understand, I don't know, I haven't really done that in an actual school where they really do that. But as far as I understand, speed and efficiency and quick design is not really a priority. And so I think that's one of the big things that sets Watts apart from other places is that you really do learn speed, efficiency, design, fast. You learn how to make a really good drawing in 5 minutes, in 2 minutes even sometimes. More classically in our figure drawing classes, it's like a 3-hour class. After a demo and warm-ups and everything like that, you maybe have 2 hours, 2.5 to do a drawing from the model. And if you can get a really good drawing in 2.5 hours, your ability to problem solve is very fast and very efficient. And I think that's one of the things that Watts' method of drawing really cultivates is a fast, efficient, effective drawing style and drawing approach that is adaptable to other things. I can't speak too much or too strongly on, the site size methods just because I haven't really done them that much. But one thing I do know is they can render really, really well, usually. And we can render well here too, but it's not really, it's just not the same. It's a bit different. I think there's benefits to each area. I don't necessarily want to say that either area has drawbacks because I think they're both good for different things. no matter what, I think being analytical, fast, efficient, especially in what will be required of people in today's industries, if you want to, especially if you want to go into entertainment or something like that, then a Watts type method or learning a more fluid method of drawing, I think is really a good idea. But don't discount the Barg stuff or the site size stuff just as, it doesn't have to be a competition at all. They're different things. They do different things, just like Bridgman, Riley, Loomis, Watts. They're all different tools for different purposes. If you're a knowledgeable and effective artist, then you'll use all of them to your benefit.
Okay. Got another question here. Hi, Travis. I work a regular 9-to-5 job and about 3 hours a day for art after work. Are there people like this that you have taught at Watts that have eventually got into the art industry?
That I've taught, I'm sure there are. I myself, am even like that. Even to this day still, my main job right now is kind of working on the back end of the school. So, I work most of the time I work a full day, maybe 6 or 7 hours on Sundays. And then my art time is on the side. It's always been that way for me. But, the skill development can still come in at a time like that. Even when I first came here, I was working at Starbucks as a barista and, working 40 hours there. And it's challenging, especially you get tired and, But the main thing is having a solid plan, being able to be consistent, and to follow through is important. Some days you're just going to be tired and you just should take a break. But some days, you just gotta practice and you gotta put in the time. And I think there's a lot of people in that situation where they work full time and they, whoops, I just blew out that value, too dark. There's a lot of people in that situation. And I think in fact that's most people. And there's been a lot of successful people that have come through the school. I think if there's at some point you can try to find a way to dedicate more time to it, if that's at all possible, then try to build your life around doing that. As time's going on, I'm realizing the importance of just really trying to cut out things that aren't important, or try to build my life in such a way that I can prioritize my art, because that's really the thing that makes me the happiest. And I think if slow, steady progress, try to work 3 hours a day if you can is really, really good. You can make a lot of progress with that. You can make a lot of progress with just an hour a day. It's not really that much different than if you're like trying to learn how to play guitar or speak a language. If you do an hour a day, every day for a year, you will be way, way better than when you started. So it's kind of the same thing. And I think as far as getting more into the industry, I guess you could argue that I'm in the industry now because I also teach here a lot, and but that's not necessarily the same thing as being somebody who's actually working on movies, working in games and entertainment. So, and that's still what I'm trying to get towards doing, but getting the skills over the years has been, it's been tough. But I've really started to get them now, and the thing is, once you get them and you start to build that skill set and that skill base, it then becomes a game of, let's start to use those skills for something. Don't just keep doing figure drawing endlessly for no reason. Like, you need to have a really strong understanding of where you're going and why you're going there. If it's something that inspires you, or, an area that you want to build your life into, a way that you want to build your life, you just need to be critical of the study time and the portfolio development time and the fun time, once you get good enough. And at a certain point, expanding outside of your comfort zone to really push yourself towards the development of your skills is just really important. You can make stuff happen really quick if you really want to, but that's just never been my experience, because the skill development does take a long time. I've made plenty of mistakes along the way. And, my life circumstances are not really such that I can just drop everything and only focus on art, because I have people in my life that rely on me. I need money, to live. So that's why slow, dedicated patience and towards your goals is really important. But at a certain point, you really need to be critical and understanding that the next stage of training and learning, once you get your skills to a high enough level, is portfolio development, and really trying to go very specifically for something that's going to start being in line with your goals and making you money, and then getting into the industry. But just remember that art is really not the best moneymaker industry, and it's especially not stable. So you might get hired somewhere for a couple of years and then get laid off, and then, kind of just go through that dance. So, and I haven't really experienced a lot of that yet, because I'm still a very early new teacher. I'm still really kind of an early artist, still very early on in my development. And so, as time goes on, I know I'll experience more of that. But I would say good luck to you. And when it comes to the academic skills and the drawing and trying to get your skills up, we're always going to be here doing our thing. And use that to the level that you need to be able to get and do what you want.
Right, got a quick one here. That is, was there a date for when the Watt sale goes live?
Yeah, I think it's going to be on Black Fridays, next Friday. I think the 28th or the 29th. I don't have the date memorized in my head, but yeah, so anybody who wants to sign up, we're going to have basically the biggest sale we've ever had. And you should definitely think about signing up with that next week if you're at all interested in what we do at Watts, I would say. Just keep an eye out for that. We'll send emails and Instagram and all that stuff.
And if you're not part of the mailing list, you can go to our website, just wattsatelier.com. If you scroll down a little bit, you'll have a place where you can enter your name and email address to get on the mailing list to stay up to date with all of that.
Yep.
Another question from the audience here. What brushes do you all recommend for oil?
I think the Rosemaries are really good. So Rosemary, they're a manufacturer in England, I think. And they make some really good stuff. So I would say they don't just make one type of brush though. They have all kinds of different lines of brushes that they make. So there's the Rosemary ivories, the evergreens, the masterstroke, I think Eclipse is another one. So you'll basically just kind of have to look through and get comfortable with them. What I would really recommend if you don't have any brushes, they have sets of brushes. So you can look on their website, just look up Rosemary brushes, And they might have a section on the menu bar that's like oil painting sets or brush sets. And usually those are put together by artists that, I don't know if they sponsor them or what, but you can find several artists that have really solid sets for like $100 maybe US. And then, order those brushes. If you're over somewhere in Dublin or England or somewhere there, it's probably cheaper, maybe a little bit, just because that's where they're based as far as I know. And I would say just start by getting one of their sets, which is going to try to look for a set that has a variety of different brushes in it. The reason I say that is because the type of brushes that you kind of want to look out for and know about for oil painting, I would say is kind of two main categories. There's bristles and sables. So bristles are like more aggressive brushes. This one's a little bit bent, but you can see here that it's kind of a very coarse, dense hair versus this is one of the Rosemary Eclipse brushes, I think. This is just the hairs are much more delicate. Same for this. This is a Princeton Summit. That's also a brand I really like, Princeton Summit. They're the green handle, white nylon. I would consider that to be a sable. Very soft feeling versus something like this is very hard. Now this brush, you can see how it just stabbed me, is it's bent like this. That's really bad. You pretty much should throw away that brush, but these are the kind of brushes that you want to do this kind of stuff with. You're scrubbing around. These soft brushes is what I was talking about earlier. You don't really want to scrub around like that because you're going to destroy that brush. I have some older sables that I've been painting with. This is a Utrecht mixed synthetic, which is a softer sable-y type brush. And so that is, but it's really old, so I can kind of scrub around a little bit with it, and it's not really a big deal. But if you buy some new sable brushes, do not scrub on your paintings with them because you will ruin them. So check out Rosemary. If you want some good sables or sable style brushes, check out the Princeton Summits. I think those are good. Yeah, natural hair brushes are not as eco-friendly, but they are much more durable, so they last a lot longer usually. I've had some natural hair brushes before, which are really, really nice to use, but most of the time nowadays I just go for the synthetics because I want to care for the animals a little bit more. Yeah. Okay, so let's get into laying in some deeper values for the hair and for the hat. So I'll scrub my brush out with the Gamsol just a little bit to get some of those colors out. And then I'm going to go ahead and maybe just disrupt some of these edges real quick, actually. If you want to be careful in this stage, that nose could definitely use some more work. Everything here could use more work, really. But I'm probably, how long are we going? What time are we at?
We are at an hour and a half.
Okay. Yeah, we'll probably wind it down in 20 minutes or so.
Do you want to play that when you get to?
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm just kind of filling in some of the gaps a little bit. I have a little area here that I didn't fill in, so maybe I will just hit that with a little lighter value.
We have a question that reads, Travis, do you have social media? Would love to see your work.
Oh, yeah. On Instagram, it's Cheeky Monkey Travis, which is kind of a funny name. Yeah, we'll type it in the chat.
Is it underscore?
Yeah, there's an Cheeky_Monkey_Travis. But yeah, that's my Instagram page where I post most of my stuff. You can also see a lot more figure drawings and stuff that I've done at Watts. If you go to wattsatelier.com and then you scroll down to the bottom and you view the instructors pages, you can see a lot of stuff there. in much higher resolution as well. Okay, so let's deepen some of these values a little bit. So now I am actually going in and with a thicker, somebody asked this question earlier, with a thicker, slightly more opacified version of this dark. I can see that that red makes its way all the way over here. And then it has more of that coolness over on the edge here. So we've also got, so I'm going to take some cad red deep-ish, mix it into that color, and go ahead and just hit kind of a stroke there on the edge, and I'll blend into that a little bit later on. With that more saturated red there will be kind of helpful. Doesn't make its way all the way across that though. And I think these cheeks could actually be a bit more red, so I'm going to mix up a bit more. Just try to put down a couple of chunky tiles here. That's still too muted though. So maybe I'll even mix in some of the magenta in there with the red. And maybe even a little bit of cad red light. I think that's actually vermilion that I have. At least that's what it was called. Okay, now that looks a little bit better. So, a lot of the development of these heads and these studies and stuff for me is usually starting out with some kind of base layer that's a little bit less complicated. And then I slowly start working up into the more complicated sections of it. Am I going to be able to get it exactly like he has it on there? No. Don't go into a painting, especially a painting like this, that's very chaotic and crazy, thinking that you're going to copy it very closely. You can get a semblance of it, but, you know, you just can't really copy exactly that. Like, I know if I definitely saw this painting in person, which I want to, it's on my bucket list. Got to before it gets bought for $500K, if anybody buys it. But yeah, I wish I could like do this whole painting and then bring this with me. I think it's in Maryland or somewhere, in like an auction house or something, and then look at them next to each other and just be like, you know, what he did different. Because I know it's going to be way more subtle and way more interesting looking. I can already tell that just by looking at the image of it, but. Just so masterful. So masterful. Really, really cool. Okay, so let's get to this hat. I have this brush out here that I haven't used at all.
Another question here. Do you use linseed oil?
I do sometimes. Sometimes. I'm not really using it right now in this, but possibly what I might do is once areas of this dry, I know that there is something called retouch varnish that you can use, and that kind of will resaturate the areas so that they, so oil paint will dry matte sometimes, especially the darks. So once this all dries, it's going to kind of become a little bit more matte and not as glossy. So you can take a retouch varnish and put it over it, and it, you know, brings back the luster. But I know Jeff uses that a lot, but I've actually never used it, so I actually don't know. So I actually tend to just do that with linseed oil. So once this all dries and stuff, I would take a little bit of linseed oil and kind of carefully, very carefully, in very small amounts, put it around and just sort of make some of these darker areas, you know, bring back their oomph a little bit. I do use it sometimes as a medium, but as you can see here, I'm really just using the paint. I'm not even barely using any Gamsol. I'm literally just mixing up paint and scumbling it in, and just kind of building it up that way. It was a bit overwhelming for me for a while. All the mediums and everything, but I don't know, at a certain point I realized that okay, let me preface it with this. It really depends on what kind of style you're going to try to paint in. There's some styles where I think a medium is like more required. If you're going to do a very layered kind of style, like I just know like that. If you look at somebody, I think like Noah Buchanan, who's a painter, does really, really cool stuff. I would think that he probably uses mediums because he does a lot of different layers that he builds up through in his paintings. So maybe I shouldn't, just be careful with that, because maybe I shouldn't like say that without really knowing. But I do know that depending on the style that you're painting in, you should really be aware of, what type of mediums there are. Fast drying mediums, slow drying mediums, textured mediums, impasto mediums, all kinds of stuff. And having a knowledge of those and when they would be used. Like, it wouldn't have been a bad idea for me to use like an acrylic matte medium, which is not a painting medium, on some of this background to give it a little more texture. But when you're talking about oil painting mediums, it's kind of a big area. There's like, you take like varnish and mix it with stand oil and mix it with linseed and a little bit of turpentine. And I know that there's people here, and there's probably even people over on the other side of the room that know more about that than I do. But I just don't. Never really did that. I just kind of used the paint. And I would sometimes use linseed oil.
Okay, we got another question here.
Mm-hmm.
Would you recommend watercolor as a practice medium?
No. I wouldn't entirely. Again, so many of these things is kind of like prefaced by what are you trying to do? Because go look at the work of Thomas Romaine, who does awesome character sketches and does them all with watercolor. Does illustrations that are just like amazing. He does everything with watercolor, and he's like super masterful at it. Look at Nick Alm. Nick Alm does some amazing watercolor paintings. And that's Thomas Romaine. He was like a vehicle designer and did some other stuff. He'd made a show called Code Lyoko a long time ago that I watched as a kid. And also Nick Alm. He's a fine art painter. I'm sure many of you guys know him already. And Evan did a watercolor painting the other day, which was actually really cool. But it's a very challenging medium for a variety of reasons. A lot of people start with it as a simple medium because it's just, the materials are kind of straightforward. Unless you're very inspired by watercolor, I would generally, for somebody who's newer to painting, I would want to push you towards gouache to start. And then once you get a good foundation in like how to use gouache and how to paint and looking at values, looking at shapes and edges and building up the layers of a painting, then maybe starting to transition into like an oil or a watercolor would be maybe a good idea if that's something that you wanted to do. But it's usually kind of rough for people to start out with watercolor painting. Just because of, it's tough. Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit of the background around his head. And for that, I'm just going to mix this. That's too much green, so I'm going to take more white, mix it in, a little touch of red, just to gray it down slightly. Maybe I'll just grab some of this. And that's maybe a little on the gray side, but I think it'll do okay. Maybe we'll just get a little bit more green back into that yellow ochre, a little bit of sap green. That's too much now. So it's just a back and forth. It's probably a little bit too dark as well. Okay, that might be good. Not super far off. Probably needs to be a little cooler. So we'll take a little bit of the phthalo, a little viridian, a little bit of blue. Back to white. That should be good, I think. Try it. Yeah. Seems like kind of a dark value, but this background is, it's not white by a long shot. So we'll just go ahead and add a little bit of that in there. I can be pretty textural with this too. It's not really super. Okay, but to be able to blend this hat out into the background, I need a little bit of something. So this background, a lot of it will be handled like very scrubbed in like that. And then dry, let it dry, and then go over it maybe a couple of times. Okay, so now that I got that in, I can just hit a couple of soft strokes there. Picking up a little bit of that phthalo, which is nice, that I had put down there a while back. Maybe just a touch of blue. Goes into the background here. A little bit of phthalo, a little bit of burnt umber, a little bit of red. That's actually a little bit brighter than that value, but I can take that piece that I put down there and then just again scumble it out into the background there. Lose the hat into the shadow slightly. I want to be a little careful. Cornwell very intelligently keeps the ellipse of that hat visible with a darker red. Yeah, I'm kind of bummed that I really probably can't take this much further than this on this stream just because these conditions here painting are pretty difficult. But that's okay. Hopefully I'll have this painting basically finished next Sunday. That's my plan.
Is the finished master study going to be going up on your Instagram?
Yep, definitely will be. Okay, now we can get into the hair. That's probably the last thing we'll do before we end things here. Now I'm going to take that black, a little bit of that light green that I just mixed. Mix it in slightly, a little bit of the Viridian, perhaps. Kind of a weak color, but that's okay. Okay, now that is going to work. Yeah, I just need to stand up for a second to see this. So I'm going to block it in with a bit of this lighter color. Slightly lighter green color. Kind of lost his cheekbone there. And we'll just come back in and see if we can. Yeah, it's really difficult to see exactly what I'm doing here. Okay, and then I can go through and take more robust black mixed with some burnt umber. Black. A little too aggressive on that stroke, that's okay. You can blend it out and mess with it. cut that hair a little bit. And sometimes if you need to, if you're good enough at drawing, we do a lot of figure drawing and stuff here, so, you know, we really develop those skills. Sometimes you can kind of just draw stuff in with the brush, which is often how we do it in the painting classes here, like the life painting classes. Oh, sorry, I think I was talking kind of quiet. We got a little bit more complex stuff happening with the hat. This guy looks very angry.
Got a question here. How long were you a student at Watts before being a very good artist? Like, how long did it take you?
You know, to be able to develop, you know, I've still got a long way to go. But to be able to develop your drawing and your painting to a certain level, you know, that I think most people would say is good, is probably like three years maybe. Maybe that's the beginning of when you can start getting, like, at the school we call them wall hangers. But it's like, you know, a really legit, like, good drawing, Oh yeah, that one of the model all the way on the right on the bottom is mine from a while ago, but
I don't think you can see.
yeah, I don't know if you guys can see it, but
Those are the wall.
yeah, those are the wall hangers back there, and kind of doing a good drawing like that is, you know, that's kind of what people would consider to be good, like technical draftsmanship. And so, I just messed up the brim of that hat a little bit. So to get to that level, I maybe got my first really good drawing like that, like after maybe 3 years, I'd say. And, you know, but that's kind of like sometimes it's a one-off. You do a good one and then you don't do another one to that level for like another 6 or 7 months. And then you slowly start getting more consistent. So the real, you know, being good to me is really being consistent, good and consistent. That takes a long time. And I'm still learning that today. And of course, academic drawing draftsmanship like we do here, that's different from doing painted illustrations and doing portfolio work and doing ambitious paintings and doing competitions and all that kind of stuff. You know, they do go hand in hand, but it's a little bit difficult to boil it down to just, you know, being a good artist. You need to be proficient in a lot of areas, I think, for that to happen. And I think being able to execute on command stuff that you want to do or stuff that other people would ask you is an important skill to develop.
Got another question here. When you buy a Watts course, is there any interaction with an instructor, or is it all on video or DVD or something? I can answer this one if you want.
It's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's no interaction with the instructor when you do a course with Watts. We do have our grading team, which you can see. We don't have it like public on our site, like on a web page, but if you go to wattsatelier.com/graders, you'll actually be able to see all the members of the grading team, which are some really proficient artists who have all learned exclusively through the online program. But they get good enough, they get handpicked by Jeff, and then they become part of the grading team. And so I think that page is live. Maybe just double check that, Tate. And so, you know, those are the people who are critiquing your work a lot of the time. And we're always adding new people on. You know, people cycle in and out of doing that. If it's ever something that somebody wanted to aspire to, when you do that, you get the program for free, which is cool. And we do meetings every once in a while with Jeff and the whole team. Out of the online students, yeah. Usually how it goes is people who are already grading see somebody do consistently really good submissions, and then we end up asking them. So that's why it's always good to try to do the best you can with those. So, what was that question?
It was.
Do you interaction with the instructor?
Yeah. Is there any?
So no, there's no direct interaction with the instructor. It's kind of on your own, but we have the Discord is getting quite robust now. I'll show up in there sometimes. It's been a little while since I've been in there just because I've been busy with other things. Not only this, but everything that's going to be releasing on Watts next week, and the Bridgman course and new features that we have coming out. So I've been, really a lot of stuff's going on and a lot of cool stuff to look forward to next week when we kind of release some of that stuff. But you can always do the instructor mentoring if you're, it's kind of, it's expensive. I don't think that's one of the things that's not really going to be dropping in price. I don't think next week. I think it's like $500 a month, but if you've got a budget for your education and you're, taking those in place of like in-person classes, that would be just as, or if not more expensive, then having direct access to Ben or me or Evan or anybody who's doing the mentoring. Our teachers kind of cycle in and out of the mentoring sometimes. So sometimes they're available, sometimes they're not. Yeah, I think that's probably good for tonight. I think, are there any other last questions that we didn't really get to, or?
We'll put out one more call for any last questions before we wrap it up here. If we don't get any, then I guess we'll just be done.
Maybe we could. Hey, Andy. Yep. Could you zoom back out? Kind of short-staffed here, so got Andy. Andy's also a great artist. Andy's been here for a few years. But yeah, that's so a little bit of, I'm not super unhappy with that, but it definitely needs more work. That's probably one of the, so between that head and this head, these ones actually, this one was pretty challenging. I got, it's still not, I'm not super satisfied with it. I got maybe 75% of the way into it, and I was thinking I should scrub it. But I just kept going through, and then I was able to turn it around mostly. But yeah, so that's a little, Cornwell head demo. That's like gouache phase 3 on the online school. We do master studies in gouache, so you're doing a lot of that kind of stuff. But this is, that on steroids, basically. So it's, yeah.
Oh, I'm not trying to interrupt.
Oh.
But we have a funny.
Okay, yeah, what is it?
It's oil paint or gouache. Pick one for life.
Oil.
Oil?
Yeah, for sure. I think gouache is cool, but oil all the way. I mean, if you have asked me a question like that, for sure oil. Just for me, I feel like it's just more fun, I guess. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, that's kind of a so, my plan for this is a little bit outside actually. What the plan was for me, because if I could, I started with this guy. I worked through the table into her, up through her last night. I did those two. I wanted to finish up this whole corner last night, but just didn't quite get to it. But I'll probably continue up there through here, finish off this figure through the pot, hit the background, the chair, the table, up into the rest of him, and then finish off with over there. And I think, I should be able to finish it by Sunday, Monday next week. Maybe not Monday, maybe Tuesday, Wednesday, a couple weeks from now. So, 3 hours a day, 2 to 3 hours, maybe 4. But we'll see. Definitely got more work to do on that head. That's not finished at all, but it's got some of the base in there. It could definitely be more colorful. Could really lean into the worms and cools a little bit more. That's kind of just like the general setup, I think. But that's, you know, we're dealing here. We've got a profile, we've got a back shot, we've got half a head. That one was pretty tough. This one's pretty tough. This one will be insane. I'm not, I think that's going to be pretty hard, but we'll see. So anyway, without still just yapping here, thanks for joining. And thanks for spending your time with me here on this. And, maybe do a little Cornwell head painting of your own. Do a monochrome, do it in Zorn palette. Just have some fun painting some master studies, and, hopefully you'll be looking forward to all the cool stuff we got coming to Watts for next week, end of next week, Black Friday stuff. So just stay tuned, and yeah, thanks for joining, and thanks for being here.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. And just keep an eye out, wattstatelier.com/events. We'll see you next month. Have a good night.